What's up, what's up? I'm Dr. Omatma, host of Egg Meet Sperm, where we're busting fertility myths, sharing tangible tips for your fertility journey, and bringing you the most knowledgeable guests to support your journey to parenthood. This podcast is for both women and men because getting fertile as fuck is for both partners, don't you think? Remember, just listening to this podcast won't get you pregnant, but following the tips we share just may. Let's get you fertile AF so that you can co-create the family you dream of. And if your partner's not listening to this, make sure to share this episode with your partner. Hello and welcome. I'm so excited. Welcome back. Today we're talking to Dr. Wendy Turbo. She's a functional medicine gynecologist with a thriving practice at 5 Journeys and is passionate about helping women optimize their health and lives. Through her struggles with mold and metal toxicity, celiac disease, and other health issues, Dr. Turbo has developed a deep sense of compassion and expertise for what her patients are facing. She's the co-author of Dirty Girl, Ditch the Toxins, Look Great, and Feel Freaking Amazing. Hi, Dr. Turbo. Welcome.
Hi.
So glad to have you here.
Oh,
and first of all, can I just say, I love the title of this book. So when I saw this, I was like, oh, we need to get her on this podcast because Dirty Girl, what a great name. How did you come up with that?
When I figured out I had all these toxins and the impact it was having, I looked at my husband. I said, I am such a dirty girl. And that's the book we're writing. That was that moment where it just sort of the light bulb went off. And I said, we have to write this because I'm the poster child for healthy living and I have all these toxins. So what does everyone else have? It's kind of creepy to think about.
Yeah. So let's talk about that because I feel like a lot of people do feel like they're the poster child for health. Mm-hmm. At least a lot of my clients come in like, oh, I live this amazing life and I'm aware of all the toxins and I eat really good food and I eat organic and they're doing all the right things. Yet, especially if they're struggling with fertility, it's like, fertility is not happening, right? So tell me a little bit about your journey in terms of feeling like you were the poster child and then realizing that there were all these things going on under the surface.
Yeah. And so there's so many layers to this because the first is how I was born and what I grew up in. My genetics are terrible. I remember I called my mom and I was like, I'm so happy you had me, but really you should never have reproduced because my father and she together just don't have good genetics together. By the way, I'm Ashkenazic Jewish and we're all inbred. So I have all the double copies of a lot of the bad genes. Thankfully not the BRCA gene, but I have 2 for celiac, 2 for MTHFR, 2 for bad vitamin D absorption. So I was like, okay. And then you layer on that I grew up in the 70s and 80s and we started having microwaves and processed food. And then you layer on that I decided to go to med school, which was stressful. And then I had to do a dual degree program because I'm hardcore. And then I had to do OBGYN because I love women, but that's really hard on you. So by the time you get to toxins, I'd already done a really good job of wrecking my health. And I looked great. I was skinny and I was fine and blah, blah, blah. I looked good. But when you scratch the surface, there's that layer of, I had a bunch of heavy metal fillings, mercury amalgams in my mouth. I grew up in a house that had lead. I discovered sushi in my 20s and was proud to eat tuna belly, high mercury. And then you layer on that we were at med school and residency and eating not fast food, but faster food. So cafeteria stuff, not high quality, not organic, exposed to the pesticides. And then I had multiple mold exposures. And somewhere in there, I developed full-on celiac, not just a gluten sensitivity. So it was this whole process of exposure and layering things on. And then really what set me off the cliff was when we went to Paris. We took our whole family to Paris and London. And it was about 8 days after Notre Dame burned. And we were slogging through all of this dust. And I said to my husband, it's so dusty here. And then about 3 months later, NPR did all these reports on how all that dust that we were so happily slogging through was actually lead dust. And I started to think about, okay, right after we came back from France, I gained 10 pounds, and my hair started falling out even more. And that was really the straw that broke the camel's back because it was too much. It was like the one drop that sent me off the cliff.
Yeah.
And so I think for the listeners, it's like, I do everything right. I eat organic and I try to get enough rest and I exercise. And yet, because I had such crappy underlying detox, I call it being loyal. I'm loyal to my toxins. I held on to them like my children, just held them close.
Mm-hmm. Wow. It just sounds like you've been on quite a journey. But I like what you said. It's like, it's not just your epigenetics or genes that you were given. It's not just that you were stressed. It's like none of these were isolated incidents. It was like you were just piling on top of, on top of. And then eventually your body just was like, nope. So then what happened? When was the first time that you were like, oh crap, like I need to look into what's going on here?
I call that the bad enough moment. I was sort of trucking along and then things got really bad enough. So right before France, I did the mycotoxins testing on myself and it was positive. And I was like, okay, when I come home, I'll start treating this. It was like, and so I started treating like April, May timeframe. And right after that, when I started treating, my hair started falling out and I gained the weight. So it all happened at once. And let's gain 10 pounds and have your hair fall out, says no woman ever. That's not what women say. And so that really was my watershed moment when I was like, something's really not right. I need to apply all these functional medicine principles to myself. And since I don't eat gluten, I don't eat cow's dairy, I don't drink alcohol, I don't eat sugar, I'm wicked boring, right? Like I'm like the most boring human being. I don't stay out late. I don't stay up all night. I don't do, I was like really poster child. And so that's what led me to that moment of it has to be toxins because everything else I've optimized. I take a gajillion supplements. Like really, my life is a total pain in the ass, arranged around how do I get healthy and live well? Right. And then I got these toxins.
Yeah. Yeah. So for those listeners that are tuning in and are like, I wonder if I have mycotoxins. So how do they figure out if they have mycotoxins?
You have to do a test. But if you've been exposed, meaning you had water damage. I mean, I live in Massachusetts and you guys don't have this, but we had ice dams in 2015 because we had such a bad winter and it was like freezing, warming, and everybody had water damage in their house that year. So if you've had water damage in your house and you didn't remediate it properly, you're at risk for mold exposure, mycotoxins. If you have a wet basement, if you live in an old home, if you live, schools are notoriously moldy. I have a lot of patients who are teachers and they're always exposed to mold at school. Schools are notoriously moldy. I don't know why. And so if you've had any exposure, then you start to get suspicious, right? So what's crazy is a lot of the toxins mimic each other. So the things that you'll notice for mold or mycotoxins, which is like you could have some abdominal bloating, you can have difficulty losing weight, you can have hair problems, you can have fertility issues, you can have menstrual issues. They also kind of mimic the heavy metals, which is a lot of hair. We've had patients with no hair who regrew it because they got rid of their metals. It's pretty cool to watch, actually. But you can also have a rash on your face or anywhere else on your body. Mine was on my face. I literally wanted to rip my face off. It was so uncomfortable. So there's a lot. Basically, if you do everything right and you don't feel optimized, I would suspect toxins. That's the easy answer. But it's head to toe, brain fog, rash on your face, thyroid issues, heart palpitations, asthma, bloating, gas, diarrhea, constipation, irritable bowel, whatever, you name it. Osteopenia, osteoporosis is often an indicator of metals because that's where they hang out, waiting for you to get rid of them.
Yep. And they are competitively blocking off calcium and magnesium. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So we're going to jump into it, but
Mhm.
I just want to give for the listeners that are out there actively trying to conceive.
Yeah.
We don't want them detoxing, right? So what is your
100%.
recommendation?
So the drive to be pregnant is so powerful. I have been there. I have lived it. And my recommendation is if that drive has taken you over, succumb. Don't do anything from detox. Go right for pregnancy because it's extremely powerful. And when it hits you, you've got to honor it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're actively attempting pregnancy, no detox work. It's bad for you. It's unsafe for the baby.
Yeah. Well, or what we say is like 3 to 6 months prior to conception, you could potentially do a detox supervised, like very, very supervised.
Yeah.
But not like willy-nilly detoxing yourself.
No.
One of my colleagues was like, oh, I didn't realize detox was bad before pregnancy. And she like works, I can't remember exactly what she was doing, but like supporting people with like which supplements to get or something. She's like, the number of times I've told people to detox while they were trying to conceive is really, really high. And I was like, oh my God, let's please clarify that no one should be detoxing right before conception.
Or during, so pre, during, or postpartum, no detox behaviors.
Right. Yeah. Because even postpartum, like all of those toxins that you potentially release in a detox are going to pass through the breast milk and end up to the baby.
I have bad news for you. Whether you do a detox or not, actually, your breast milk has a lot of toxins.
Yes, of course.
You should nurse. You should definitely nurse. It's really good for the baby. And that's one way that I got some of my toxins was from being nursed. And you'll release it into the breast milk.
Totally.
But it's good to nurse. If you can, you should. Absolutely.
Yeah. So in terms of detoxification, or even we take a step back, there are a lot of reproductive toxins, right? There are a lot of known toxins that are potentially causing harm to the baby, causing harm to you, causing harm to your fertility and your hormones. So can we dive a little bit into what those toxins are and and how best we can avoid them?
Sure. So let's not drill too deep down because it gets very messy very fast. So let's go on a high level. One toxin that I just want to make sure we mention is infectious. So if you have Lyme disease or any of the associated co-infections, which I think you're down in Texas, so that's not so big down there, but it's coming. And up here, Lyme disease is huge. So if you have any infectious issue, that can transmit. So you want to take care of that because that actually can lead to miscarriages. So we want to take care of infectious issues. And then what I'll call the low-hanging fruits. So anything that's taken too much can be a toxin. So sugar, dairy, gluten, those are the big three. And if you're sensitive to any of those or addicted to any of those, either one is interchangeable here, then those can serve as toxins and create a state of inflammation. So some toxins will directly harm you and some toxins will torture you and indirectly harm you and make it harder to get pregnant. So if anything you're doing causes a state of inflammation, that's not so good for getting pregnant. So that's the next level. And so what I would say about that is if you're trying to get pregnant and it didn't just happen, those teenagers who are like, I wasn't trying, or the people who say, oh, I got pregnant on my first time. I wasn't. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not even that fun because you didn't get to enjoy the process. But okay, if you've had more than 1 month of trying to get pregnant, you're not pregnant. And that's not to say that more than 1 month is pathological. It's just more like if you're starting to be like, okay, I'm trying and I'm not pregnant, get rid of anything processed and go for whole food, plant-based, looks like its natural state because your body will like that. And that decreases inflammation because the inflammation acts toxic to you. That's one category. And then there's the toxins, like what do you want to stay away from? So big picture things, don't spray your yard with Roundup. Those are endocrine disruptors. Don't drink from plastic reusable bottles. People said to me, one of my patients said to me, well, it's always in the fridge. I said, well, it might be in the fridge at your house, but it had to get to you. And you have no idea what happened between the time it was packaged to the time you opened it or put it in your fridge. So low hanging fruit is get rid of single use plastic bottles, because aside from being bad for you, they're bad for the world. So it's sort of a win-win to not use that. Okay. And then other toxins, like make sure you're not having a mold exposure. If you grew up in a house that was built before 1978, there was lead, most likely in the paint. If you're into construction and you demo old homes, you get exposed to the lead. Mercury, fish, and fillings. So if you have fillings, you probably want to address those, and don't eat the high mercury fish. They're bad for you, period. God, I sound like I'm really a hard nut, but if you're working on being as healthy as you can be, then those are the sort of broad behaviors. We haven't touched on environmental toxins and chemicals, but I think that that's a heavier lift because your bed has flame retardant in it. And so that you might not want to replace your bed per se, but I would say go for things that are low hanging and easy to access for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you just mentioned fish. So the smaller the fish, the less mercury.
Yes. Yes. The bigger the fish, it eats it, all the fish it ate, it collects in them. Mm-hmm. And then that fatty belly of tuna that we love to eat is full of mercury. So, I actually grew up eating Chilean sea bass because my family's from Michigan and they used to like smoke it. It was the best thing I've ever eaten, but I'm sure I got mercury from that.
Yeah. Yeah. All the things, often it feels like the things we love, right? It's like, really? I got to give that up too.
Yeah. So let's talk about that for a second, because you don't have to do anything. Really, you can choose to do it. So my patients will say to me, are you making me do that? I'm like, no, hell no, I'm not going to make you do that. But let's reframe the conversation, because I feel better when I do X, Y, and Z, as opposed to I have to do this. Nobody wants to have to. That's terrible. And if I don't do this, I'm a bad person. No, you're awesome the way you are, and you might feel better. So let's put it in language that makes you feel good. And there's no cheating in my world. You never cheat on your diet. You might actually have excursions and eat food that doesn't make you feel good, but you're never a cheater. You're always a human being doing their best. And then sometimes you do things that don't work for you because you're human. Mm-hmm. So how do you minimize that? Guard your flank, plan on, if you're going to a wedding, you know you're going to have wedding cake. So then the days before and the days after, just be a little stricter on how you eat so that you can tolerate that excursion, and then forgive yourself and go back. Get right started up again. Right. So you just brought up that point that I want to make sure people, perfection only exists in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. They're perfect there, but you're
not even there.
I know, right?
Not even
on
there.
Screen, on the big screen. It's beautiful.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's an important point, because I feel like it's what I find most interesting are the clients that are like, hey, I feel amazingly better, right? I've been doing this for 2 or 3 months. I feel incredible. My energy's better. I have better sex drive. I've lost 20 pounds, all the things.
By the way.
Right. All in a couple of months. And then they're like, and I'm done with that. Like, I'm not doing that anymore. And it just makes me pause, because it's like, well, is the feeling that you feel in your body, that you feel better, healthier, more enlivened, how do we prioritize how we feel versus the addictions that we have to sugar, whatever else, like all the inflammatory things? And it's often like, I always feel sad when, like, it's, oh man, like you got all of these results so quickly, and yet that's not enough for you. And it just always drives me crazy. So I'm curious what your response is to that.
So it's interesting. We were just before this podcast listening to Simon Sinek's TED Talk.
It starts with why.
Yes, I think
I
I've watched it
love
like
that
15
talk.
times.
Oh my God.
And so one of the things that I really work with when I work with women is like, what's your why? If you're coming to me to lose weight, you're in the wrong place. That's actually not the right way to work with me, because I'm here. My role is to inspire and empower you to be vital, healthy, vibrant, alive, interested in intercourse, and able to do it till you're at least 100, that you improve decade over decade. That is my why. That's the game I'm playing. So for women, when you put it into the context of we're playing a big game, and as a woman, if you are a female, you automatically have multiple jobs and have a million things on your plate. And it only gets bigger when you have children. And so how do we set the stage for you to be as healthy as you can be, so that when you have children, you're not a tapped out mom, that you can actually get things done, be at the top of your game, be the best mom you can be. And if you're working outside the home, manage both of those roles in a way that's as graceful as it can be. How do we need to get you support and help and assistance? So for me, I start with the big why of, we're doing this so that you can be your best person. And it's not a short-term gain. If there's anything short-term or unsustainable, we have to flip the switch and convert it to something that's going to be sustainable. Because it's not always, people can't always do their A game. Maybe it's their B plus game. So if it's a choice between B plus all the time or A plus for a week and then D minus for 3 weeks, I totally want the B plus game.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like finding those places where you feel good about it, but it doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
And perfection is perfection is an interesting thing. And I'm curious if you want to speak to it. I find that a lot of couples, women specifically on the path of fertility, are often like, oh, I have to do everything perfect or it's not going to happen. And I'm always like, hey, if you do my program 90%, you're going to be successful. You don't need to do it 100%. So I think it's a good mindset to be like, hey, we're doing this so that you can stay on this path. And there's always places, like you probably approach it similarly, like we're on a team and we're figuring out what's going to work for you as an individual, as a couple. What are the systems that you can put in place so that you can keep going on this path?
I totally agree with that.
Yeah. So very early on in this chat, you mentioned microwaves, and I'm very curious if you have seen research that is supportive or anti-microwaves.
Small studies only. So just small studies. And the one that sticks in my mind the most was about, and we replicated actually as my daughter's 6th grade science experiment, 5th or 6th grade, I can't remember, one of the two, which was that if you microwave water and then cool it and feed a plant with that water, the plant will die. And I was like, what? Are you kidding me?
No, really?
Really? So N of 1, it's tiny sample size. And so my daughter did it as her science experiment. We had a control, which was water that was heated on a Bunsen burner and then cooled, and water that was heated in a microwave and cooled. And I bought the plants myself. I watched them. And the one that has the microwave water, cooled water, that plant was starting to die by the end of her experiment.
Wow.
So I haven't seen a ton of research, and it's funny, I was talking about this earlier with someone, and basically what I would say is it's not my preferred form of heating up food. And I recognize that most people aren't like me. I'm like, I don't care what I eat. I don't care if it's cold. I don't care if it's hot. I'll eat it. I don't care. I'm grateful to have food. I don't care. I open it up and eat my lunch. But so for some people, they really need it warm and they don't have time to stick it in the toaster. So if you need to microwave your food, so be it. But don't microwave in plastic, because you're heating up the plastic molecules, which are releasing endocrine disruptors, which are messing with your fertility, your periods, your hormones, your fibroids, your skin, kind of everything. So don't do that. Pick your battles. And if so pick make a better choice, maybe don't make a perfect choice. Start with no more microwaving in plastic and use it as sparingly as you can.
Mm-hmm. And plastic is in like those Chinese food containers.
Yes.
The paper that looks like paper, but it's actually plastic on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
You guys, we got to get rid of that. Like, no plastic. Just be done with plastic. Do what you need to do. Get rid of plastic.
Remember how the soup for Chinese food would come in that plastic container, and it would be sort of suctioned closed because it was so hot when it came in, and then as it cooled, it suctioned. Yeah. But the plastic is releasing all those endocrine disruptors, so you don't want to eat that stuff. And like caveat, right? Because if you're trying to get pregnant, the stakes are high, and so that makes women nuts to sort of put out. You can do this, you can't do that. If you're in the middle of nowhere and you need to eat, you need to eat. Don't fast. You need to eat.
Yeah. And honestly, like, even if you are in the middle of nowhere and you need to eat, you can probably find food that's not in plastic.
Yeah. Make or don't have hot food in plastic.
Yes, exactly.
Just make a better choice. You don't have to be perfect. Make a better choice than sort of the knee-jerk or unconscious choice.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So that's very interesting, because the microwave question I get so often. Yeah. And I'm like, well, I haven't seen any convincing research, but it's probably not great for us.
It's not the best.
Yeah. And with that said, it's like, all right, if you're going to microwave and you're doing it in glass, it's a lot better. And it's probably better. It's probably still better than eating out potentially. At least you have control over what the food is and what you put in it and whether it was deep fried or steamed. So you have a lot of variables when it comes to food, but finding what works for you is good enough.
Yeah. I always feel like wherever you are, level up one step. You don't have to get to perfection. You need to get from where you are to one step. Get comfortable, do it again, and keep doing that. And then you look back 6 to 12 months, you go, oh, I'm a lot better than I was. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can always, you're like, hey, that was easy. What else can I do? What else can I do? What else can I do? And and you'll get further if you just keep leveling up, rather than the person that's never exercised and is used to sitting on the couch all the time and is like, I'm going to go run a marathon tomorrow.
No,
not a great idea.
No.
Yeah. So work up to it. That's really good advice. Let's talk about your book a little bit, because I know it was recently released. So tell us about the book. What's in it? How do we find it?
Great question. So what it is, it takes my story and experience of discovering all these things about myself and brings in patient stories and separates it into essentially the things you can act on in chapters, right? So it's 10 chapters, and each chapter covers a different area of life. So we cover body products, we cover your food, we cover stress and sleep, we cover the way you live, we cover metals and mycotoxins and environmental. So we cover everything by chapter by chapter. And what we're really looking for in each chapter is, how do you level up? Where are you? Where are you starting? And what are the top 3 to 5 things that we would say that you could make an impact on your life that you would notice the difference on? And certainly there's things you got to work with a functional medicine provider. Like if you want to get rid of metals, you really need a functional medicine provider. I'm into data. I like measuring what's the pre, what's the post, what difference did it make? And what are the things that are most impactful? So the book takes you through what are the things you can do on your own, because you can do a ton of things on your own to clean up the exposures you have to toxins in your everyday life. And that's, what are you cleaning your house with? What are you sleeping on? What kind of clothes are you wearing? Did you wash them first? What are you using for shampoo? So there's everything about that. And it really gives you tools and particular steps. And it's on sale on our website, which is 5journeys.com. And it's also on Amazon. And I actually saw it at Barnes and Noble online, and I think Target. So it was picked up by a number of retailers.
Amazing.
It's
Congratulations. That's so exciting.
Thank you.
Awesome. So I am so excited that you were able to join us today. Was that an amazing episode or what? Make sure to check our show notes so that you can link up with our guests. And if you're not a part of our secret Fertile AF community, you can join for free via the link in our show notes. Last but not least, have you showed us some love lately? It would mean the world to us if you could share and review our podcast. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time on Egg Meets Sperm. Peace.